Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Down the Rabbit Hole with Ed and John. Tonight we're going to go down Diana's rabbit hole.
Good evening, John. Good evening,
Ed.
listeners.
How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. Sorry it's a week late. It wasn't actually timed to coincide with the coronation, but I had some issues last week that I'm not going to go into.
Oh, we all had issues last week, mate.
Well, I've got permanent issues, but that's just me.
Yeah.
But it's worked out quite well with the coronation of King Chucky.
Yeah.
And yeah, one of my fun things for Saturdays, once every hour, I'm going to post a GIF and a quote from Diana.
We're going to be live on Saturday because we're going to commentate on the events. So maybe.
Well, I think I'd rather listen to that than listen to the actual coronation.
Well, they'll send you the link, but maybe you could even pop in for 5 minutes.
That sounds like fun.
Yeah, I'll speak to Ben and see if we could have guests. We could have the odd guest drop in and say, "What do you think of the coronation?"
I might even bring some custom Chasing Dissent only memes with me, because the fun thing I'll be doing for the coronation is finding every picture that I can of King Chucky and giving him his right head, just like I do with blackface. The other guy.
I think I've got a title for Saturday. I'll run it by Ben first, though. I'll not announce it here, but yeah. Oh, so where do we start, Princess Diana?
Yeah, right.
So
well, we've got some slides.
She would have been a year older than me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she was born in 1961.
Yeah.
12 years older than me.
I once got within about 2 feet of her. I was down in Leicester Square, and there was a premiere going on at the cinema, and all these people were milling about, and I goes, "What's going on then?" And they said, "Princess Diana's coming to the premiere," and I goes, "Oh right, that would be quite good if I could get a photo." So I went up to the police that were there. I mean, this is in the 80s, remember? So I went up to the police that were there, flashed the warrant card, and the guy goes, "Yeah, on you go. Let me right into the press pen." So I was right in the front, right front and centre, and took her photograph, her and Chucky, as they wandered down the line. So that was how close I got at that point.
Most people that I've met who've been close to her said she had this kind of aura. She's one of those people that you didn't just see her, you kind of felt the presence as well. And the only person that I've been personally close to who I would say was a bit like that was Kenneth Kaunda, KK, who was the president of Zambia for many, many years, from independence until the early 90s. Yeah. And he had this presence. There was something about this person that when you're near them, you kind of notice that this is not just your average sort of person.
Yeah. I suppose there are some people like that, aren't there? I mean, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there are connections back to the episode that we did about JFK. Speaking of which, we've got one big connection to the last episode of Down the Rabbit Hole, actually.
Really?
Which was the
right.
Jack the Ripper one, which is this lovely old battle axe, the Queen Mother.
Mm-hmm.
And the two ladies that you can see in this picture are the two who arranged Diana and Charles's marriage. I can't remember what the other one. I keep seeing her name and I keep forgetting it.
That's not the woman that got kind of suspended briefly, was it? For
what for her thing? I don't think so. The name, I keep forgetting her name. I'm terrible with names. But yeah. Anyway, so that's the first connection. The other connection, of course, is Diana's bloodline, which is connected back. Yeah. Well, she's related to Winston Churchill, and his father, obviously, Lord Randolph Churchill from Jack the Ripper fame last week. Now, so some people think it was an accident, others think it was murder. most people were just shocked and confused by the whole thing. And the media pushed the accident theory. Everybody wanted to believe the accident theory. If you ask most people, they'll say, "Oh, drunk driver."
Well,
but there's too many questions. I've got a list of questions that will come up in a minute. But let's just start right at the beginning. She was born Lady Diana Frances Spencer, and born in Park House on the Royal Sandringham Estate in Norfolk on the 1st of July 1961. She was the third and youngest daughter of Viscount Althorpe, later the 8th Earl Spencer, and his first wife, Frances Roche, who later became Frances Shand Kidd. Her parents separated when she was 6. That's significant for the people who are interested in the bloodlines and all of this kind of thing, because bloodlines have everything to do with not just why she married Charles, but also most likely why she was murdered, which is my personal opinion.
Strong words. He's giving the game away right at the beginning. He's giving the game away.
It would be hard not to.
She was quite a plain-looking child, though, wasn't she? Really?
Yeah, she was. She had the kind of innocence to her,
but
also
like a swan,
traumatized.
Like a swan. She really did blossom.
Yeah. But her parents separated when she was 6, which is significant considering the trauma that bloodline families like to instill upon their children. Because it's also the age of 6 that the heart chakra begins to activate, and when the personality kind of starts to properly be formed. Interestingly, there was a son born to the family before Diana, but he died in infancy, which we'll assume that it was just something natural, but there's all sorts of elite blood sacrifice rituals relating to firstborn sons, and it's shocking, but when you dive down enough rabbit holes, you realize that these things pop up too frequently for them to necessarily just be something that you can dismiss.
Well,
now, interestingly,
strangely enough, we were talking about culture the other day on one of the shows, and it's like, if you think about it, everybody wants you to be inclusive of all cultures. But if you think of things like Mayan culture and things like that, they were right into the old early sacrifice of young people, weren't they?
Yeah, and that, I mean, it's interesting because once you dive down certain rabbit holes that I don't necessarily want to talk about because you told me the channel's being monetized, so I don't necessarily want to say certain things, but there are blood sacrifice rituals and other things from the past, both Mayan and other cultures. I mean, the Mayans are kind of well known, but these things exist elsewhere as well.
And to be fair, you don't actually have to go that far off piste to find, the human race still practicing some pretty barbaric, pretty barbaric body modifications under the guise of religion or cleanliness or whatever. And Africa springs to mind, with female genital mutilation. I mean, that's just shocking. I find it shocking that people could still be doing that in this day and age. And I
do too.
I find it really, really disturbing that anyone could condone it. It's just bizarre.
But there are people who do. I mean, there's this, and I don't agree with them. And I think certain things, it's all right having your cultural norms, but when it involves inflicting pain on children, you kind of have to draw a line, in my opinion.
And you're right. But anyway, let's get back into Diana.
Yeah, no, I mean, the thing with Diana is that this stuff is all relevant, because the thing that people have to understand is that Diana genealogically was a Stuart, so she was ancestrally related to the ancient royal family of the Britons. Bearing in mind that the current royal family were called Saxe-Coburg-Gotha until the First World War. Then they decided they had to change the name to Windsor, just because having a German name when you're fighting the Germans is not such a good PR image.
When you're fighting your cousin, the Kaiser.
Yeah, pretty much. And then half of your family. I mean, Edward, the one that abdicated, was an open Nazi and kind of agreed with quite a lot of Hitler's stuff as well. So you kind of,
I think he was quite sympathetic to their cause, shall we say?
So there was. I believe that this is one of the reasons that Diana was chosen by her grandmother. Well, not her grandmother, but Charles's grandmother, the Queen Mum.
Yeah.
Because of the blood, because they basically wanted to bring this ancient royal bloodline, and they wanted to kind of merge the blood.
So to be blunt about it, they wanted to breed her.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, she even described herself as a broodmare.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That was once William and Harry were born, she said that herself that Charles's attitude towards her changed completely. And once she'd produced the heir and the spare, any pretense of affection, I mean, not that there was any, she's quoted as saying that when Charles first proposed to her, she told him that she was really in love with him, and his response was, "Whatever love is."
Yeah, I remember.
So yeah, and this is the king. This is the guy being this is the crown dude from Saturday.
Yeah,
and so it was a political marriage, serving to introduce the Stuart bloodline into the Windsor bloodline, and effectively justify it. And it's interesting because her marriage into the royal family was kind of unique. She was only the second truly British-born outsider to marry into the German Hanover-Windsor dynasty in its entire 300-year reign. So she was a true Brit, born and bred, and they were all effectively ancestral Germans.
Yeah. Was the Duke of Edinburgh, did he have some sort of Greek was he he had a Greek connection?
Greek German, I think.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I mean, let's face it, the royal family is effectively. I mean, it's a European royal family, and they do breed amongst themselves. You know, they don't really like to introduce too much diversity into the firm, as they call it.
Absolutely, and I mean, they had their problems with, as we were talking about on the last show, about Jack the Ripper, Prince Eddie. I mean, he was subnormal, as they would have said back in those days.
Yeah.
And he had issues probably stemming from all the inbreeding.
Yeah, and the Blackadder, they did a whole series on the Prince Regent, didn't they?
Absolutely. Yeah, and I mean, it's also, people say, oh, Diana, she was a bit of a slag and all this kind of thing, and this sort of harkens to the title of the podcast, which I thought was provocative and fun, so I didn't object to it.
Yeah.
But she was 17 when she met Charles.
Yeah.
And this whole thing was arranged. He was going out with her sister at the time.
Yeah, so was Victoria
and the
Guthrie.
Whole thing was an arranged marriage.
Victoria Guthrie was 17 when she met Prince Andrew.
Yeah, I thought you said the show was being monetized.
Sorry,
dude.
It probably won't be there. Yeah. But anyway, I only stated a fact.
So
I only stated a fact.
Well, no, you were stating facts. There's nothing wrong with facts apart from keep checking them.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I mean, I was alive back in the 80s, and the picture that you can see on the left of Charles and Diana, it was one of the most famous pictures that's ever been taken back then. I mean, it was everywhere, magazine covers. I mean, it was like Star Wars on a merchandise level. It was that big. And from Diana's perspective, it was all she'd met Prince Charming, and she was going to marry into the royal family. Oh, and Charles was in his 30s, by the way.
Yeah, he was. Yeah,
that's the other thing. So there was a big age gap between them.
Yeah.
And yes, so there's that too. Which, if you dial the ages back like 5 years, he would have been in his mid-20s and she would have been in her mid-teens.
yeah, that's true.
Yeah, okay. Let's just not go down that rabbit hole. Diana quoted herself. I can't remember which book it was from, But she said he found the virgin, the sacrificial lamb, and in a way he was obsessed with me. But it was hot. Diana quoted herself, knew what mood it was going to be. Up and down, up and down. He was in awe of his mama, intimidated by his papa, and I was always the third person in the room. She gave birth to William, the couple's first child, Prince of Wales now, through an induced birth on the 21st of June, 1982. Now, the official palace explanation for why the birth was induced was because it had to fit around Prince Charles's polo schedule. And I left to pause there just for people to contemplate that.
Well, if we think about, and obviously I'm no expert on maternity, but generally the first one, if it's going to be late, it's going to be in the first one that's late. And 1 to 2 weeks isn't unusual. So whereabouts was she? Was she due? Or was she thereabouts due? Or
I'm not entirely sure. Right, I'd have to. I'm sorry, I didn't actually think to research that.
Yeah, you let me down.
What's more significant is that the 21st of June is obviously the summer solstice, which is a massively important occult date. And then shortly afterwards, Harry came along, and they've always been joked about as the heir and the spare. We're not going to go into. I mean, Harry's kind of. Well, given that he's in the news, and I don't want to get sued by Meghan.
No, we could do a whole rabbit hole on Harry on his own.
But we'll kind of leave the pictures of. If you put a picture of Harry, Charles, and James Hewitt in a line, you'll kind of you'll start. But then. Was that really what was going on? I do sometimes wonder about it because I'm not convinced that.
I think it William,
was until.
I think William is definitely Charles's.
The thing is, but was she? Because it wasn't until Harry was born that they basically started to kind of shun her.
Yeah.
And that was kind of her turning point as well, realizing that holy moly, these people really don't care about me at all.
Yeah.
And so after Harry's born, all the pretense of love is pretty much gone, and he's back with Queen Camilla, who I don't particularly want her as queen, but let's just not go there either. And one has to wonder whether Charles's affection was actually genuine from the beginning.
Well, I think Charles is he's had a long-standing friendship with Camilla, hasn't he? Even before Diana came on the scene.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, at one point, Diana and Camilla actually had lunch and stuff. I mean, I don't know how many people who are listening have seen The Crown, but that actually deals with some of the historical points in the most recent series. And yeah, I mean, the thing with Diana was that she was very. Let's just pop the next picture up. That's the wedding with Diana's side of the family on the far. The bottom right is Earl Spencer. Next to that, his second wife, who Diana didn't get along with at all, and had a massive go out one night, accusing her of being the most evil person in the world. Charles, who all you can really see is the ears. And then, the current Earl Spencer is second from top right. And Diana's brother, obviously. That's Diana with her mother.
Yeah.
And
a handsome woman.
Yeah. And this is obviously William and Harry.
Yeah.
At a younger age. And I think that part of the issue that part of her falling out with the family was her insistence on trying to raise her boys as normal kids as possible. And there's loads of stuff that's been written about some of the things that she used to do with them to try and make them feel a bit normal.
Well,
one of the things that's always stuck in my mind is a story about her. They were going to go out for ice cream, and so she got them all kind of camouflaged up with the sunglasses and stuff. And she'd forgotten some money, and she she said to them, "Oh, I've forgotten the grannies," because with the kids, I don't know if this is true or not, but she used to refer to pound notes as grannies.
Right. Yeah. Right.
Which is kind of what you would do with your kids if their grandmother is the queen. But yeah, I think she fairly quickly realised after Harry was born that the fairy tale was done, and she was effectively being treated as an interloper.
Yeah. Well, if you watched, well, I don't know if you got to see the pre-roll, but there was footage of them at Chessington, and I mean, she genuinely looked like she was having fun with them there. You know, just a fairly regular family at that point in time. Although Charles is nowhere to be seen. There's some kind of equerry or protection guy and the teacup with them when they're on the waltzer, you know. But
that may well have been Barry Manicky. He actually comes into the story in a while. But obviously after after Diana and Charles kind of started growing apart, let's say in polite terms, the full force of the royal propaganda machinery was unleashed on her. And there was accusations of unfaithfulness. I mean, a lot of the stories about her being a tart and this and that some of them were true, because she definitely had some affairs, but she's human, so you can't.
She had on.
I mean, the husband's cheating on her.
She had on
and yeah, absolutely. And I think for the most part, she did it really discreetly. But also, the propaganda and the press and the sort of briefings were effectively trying to blame her for the disintegration of the marriage when it was actually Charles's fault. And they painted her as a crazy person. And I mean, she'd struggled with bulimia for years, pretty much since she'd realized that Charles, the whole thing was probably a really bad idea. And there's actually a quote from her sisters where she went just before the wedding. She went to her sisters and said, "Oh, I don't think I can go ahead with this." And they literally turned around to her and said, "Look, love, your name's on you're on all the tea towels, you're on all the cups and everything. It's too late. You can't back out now.
Can't back out now. What are we going to do with all these bloody mugs?"
Yeah, you can't have the royal bride not turning up for the royal wedding. Yeah. That would have been, I mean, it probably would have been the biggest news of all time if that happened. Diana, she's in an MG headed for Dover.
I'm off.
And yeah, there was reports that she was having an affair with her security guard, a guy called Barry Manicky, who I think, but don't quote me, may well have been the guy that she was pictured of in the teacup, because I mean, obviously they spent a lot of time together.
Okay. I'm not sure, because the guy in the teacup wasn't very bra.
No. And Manicky was actually killed in a road traffic accident. He was beheaded on a motorcycle.
Ah, right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And shortly after, that was shortly afterwards, after the affair was kind of discovered. And Charles cruelly and sarcastically broke the news to her by saying with a smirk before she even knew of his death, "Shame about poor Barry." And she's reported to one of her therapist ladies who gave some interviews afterwards, who said that Diana had said that she was crying hysterically. And I said, "What's the matter?" Diana said, "I can't believe it." She sobbed. "They killed him. They've killed him." And I said, "Who did they kill?" And she told me that Barry, had been decapitated on his motorbike, and how she thought at first it was a terrible accident, but now she knows that the royal family killed him because Prince Charles' detective just told her that if she didn't cool it with Hewitt, the same would happen to him. He told her that she should not think that she was indispensable either. So, yeah. Now.
Yeah. Ooh.
So this is the preamble to Diana's crash. This was basically where she was at. I mean, she was also she'd been doing campaigns against landmines, and I think
I remember
this contributed to her death, because nobody messes with the military-industrial complex. in a serious way, in the kind of way that because she could get 100 paparazzi and cameras on her just by making one phone call.
Yeah.
And she could be literally taking her neighbor's dog for a walk and scooping up dog poo, and there would be 200 paparazzi around her taking pictures of Diana scooping up dog poo. The other big thing, which is kind of relevant to today, is her involvement with the AIDS crisis, which again is a whole nother rabbit hole. But I saw this picture when I was looking through material for the slides, and it kind of demonstrates to me, you can just see the sort of humanity and the sort of person that she is. Could you honestly imagine Charles or the late Queen or Camilla or any of them, maybe William and Harry, sitting in bed with someone who's
I can't
theoretically.
I can't imagine William or Harry doing it. I think Harry's William's a bit of a cold fish. I really do. I
suspect that's also because of I think part of Diana's death was also done to traumatize her sons. I think that allegedly, but no, obviously allegedly. All of this is just speculation. Fantasy. Nobody sue me, please.
Yeah, I mean,
it's all speculation.
It's speculation. But surely we're allowed to have our opinions, and we're allowed to examine the facts and hearsay and determine, because we're all adults. Surely we're allowed to determine what we think is right or not. But I was looking at her sitting there with that guy in that bed. It's like she looks genuine, you know.
Yeah.
She really looks.
She looks like a person who cares about other people.
Yeah, she did. Yeah.
So she was a threat. I mean, she was a threat to a lot of people. She was a threat to the royal family. She was a threat to the military-industrial complex. She was a loose cannon as well, and she was popular before the internet.
Yeah, she's like she was your original influencer, wasn't she? Really?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you can only imagine how many Twitter followers or Instagram followers she would have had.
Yeah, I mean, she'd put these Logan Pauls and that into the back seat. She really would.
Mm-hmm. And so she basically started this affair with Mohammed Al-Fayed's son Dodi, which I was having issues with the labels on the slides. So there we go. There's Mohammed and Dodi Al-Fayed, and Dodi was daddy's boy. He basically did everything his father told him to.
Yeah.
And he was actually going out with a Hollywood actress, Kelly something or other.
Kelly LeBrock?
No, not that one. Brooke or Smith or something.
Kelly Brooke?
Possibly. But they were and Dodi, if anyone doesn't know him, was the guy who produced Chariots of Fire, which is pretty much his only claim to fame, apart from banging Diana.
Yeah. And I mean, Al-Fayed, I don't know if you're going to touch on it, but Al-Fayed has he did nothing but try and become a British citizen for years and years and years.
And ingratiate himself, and he was sponsoring polo matches, and he wanted in to the British establishment.
And he didn't get there, did he?
No, despite sacrificing his eldest son. Which I shouldn't laugh, but it's kind of how these sick people actually work. And so Diana and Dodi ended up in Paris on the fateful night. I can't actually remember what the date was now. But there are some really interesting questions about the crash, because I think enough of the preamble. Let's get to the meat and potatoes of the episode. First of all, security was changed at the last minute because of a massive crowd of paparazzi. Mm-hmm. Now, you have to bear in mind that Diana's movements and security were entirely controlled by Mohammed Al-Fayed. He was basically the one that was calling the shots.
Yep.
There was talk about an announcement of a marriage. Dodi had gone out to buy a ring, and somehow notice leaked to the press that there was going to be some sort of marriage announcement relating to Diana, which at the time I mean, paparazzi would have been flying in from anywhere they could to be there.
Yeah.
And so there was a massive crowd of paparazzi outside the Ritz. They were due to go out for dinner, decided not to go out for dinner, and then essentially got in the Mercedes. There was a Mercedes brought round the back. They jumped in that, drove off, and the rest is history, as they say. So the big questions, because I'm going to kind of go through it a bit.
And before we go through these questions,
yeah,
have you verified that anything said in these questions are fact, or if they are not, can you point out where there may be allegations or suppositions?
They are all, they're not allegations, because to say I'm not making any allegations against anyone.
Okay,
but outlining a bunch of theories.
Yeah, so
and the questions are also for anyone who's interested, who hasn't researched this already. The questions are a starting point for people to do their own research.
Okay.
Because as with all of these rabbit holes that we investigate, part of the reason why I like doing these is to give people a bit of an overview of the stuff that I found, and encourage them to open their eyes a bit more and go off and do a bit of reading. I mean, there are untold books relating to Diana. If people want to hear some of my favorites, just shout me out on Twitter or something like that. I'm more than happy to talk to people about it.
Okay.
But it's all speculation. Anything, I can't back anything up with facts. I've just got what I think is a common sense kind of what is going on here type of attitude.
Are we going to go through these questions then, or?
Yeah, I'll go through them really quickly,
right.
And then we can go into a little bit more detail. I mean, essentially what happened was they got into the car, sped off on a really kind of crazy route, which is part of the question. So just quickly, there was no security on this car. Normally when someone important like Diana's traveling, you have at least one other vehicle that will have security, medical equipment, whatever emergency supplies they might need, and is also a chase car. And generally speaking, with Diana, they'd have motorcycle outriders as well, where you have two guys either side, two policemen. Mohammed Al-Fayed had actually refused offers from the French protection police, because they contacted him saying, look, Diana's in town, let us give you some help. And he'd said no. I've got a map in a minute that will show you the absurd route that they took, which ended up taking them through the Pont del Mar tunnel. This is one of the big ones. There's 17 cameras, CCTV cameras on the route that their car took. They were all switched off. And the lights in the tunnel switched off just before the car got to the tunnel.
Okay, were the cameras switched off, or did they fail?
It's never been explained.
Right, okay.
To suffice it to say, they weren't working. Which
is
interesting about
all
CCTV cameras. Yeah, all 17 of them. And they were also the only cameras in Paris at the time that weren't working.
Okay.
So it could be that they were switched off. It could be that some camera gremlin kind of decided to take them over. Don't know. There was also an interesting report from a guy in one of the Diana books. I can't remember off the top of my head which one. And he was one of those people who habitually listens to police radio frequencies. And he was basically sitting listening to the police radio. And there was a 20-minute blackout between 12:20, which is when Diana and Dodi actually left the Ritz in the Mercedes, which is also numerologically a fairly significant set of numbers. And 12:40, which is when the accident happened, 20 minutes later.
That's a big blackout for a city the size of Paris.
Yeah, the guy basically said it all went quiet for 20 minutes, and then suddenly when it came back, everything was exploding with all the police asking what was going on and that kind of thing.
Yeah. Okay.
Henri Paul, he's basically the guy that's being blamed. He's the official narrative.
He's the patsy, yeah.
Yeah, he's the patsy.
Allegedly.
And there's a lot of questions about him. First of all, Why was he chosen to drive the car? He wasn't a driver by trade. He was Mohammed Al Fayed's security chief.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't work for the limo company who supplied the Mercedes. And there's a lot of questions about that Mercedes as well. One that I forgot to put in the list, which is when Mercedes actually offered to examine the car, the French told them no.
No.
They didn't. Yeah. Why would you not? I mean, because the car failed spectacularly. It didn't. Mercedes are not supposed to. They're not supposed to do that.
Yeah.
Kind of swerve completely out of control. But obviously, people are saying that the Henri Paul was drunk.
Uh-huh.
But when they tested, his blood was 3 or 4 times the alcohol limit. So he should not have been walking straight.
Okay.
He should have been slurring. He should have been visibly drunk to the people around him, to the point where you would not get into a car with someone that smelt of that much booze. But more significantly and more interestingly, and which has never really been explained, is his levels of CO2 in his blood.
Yeah.
Oh, hang on. Is it CO2 or carbon?
Carbon monoxide or carbon
I think it might be carbon monoxide. I think that's my bad. I think that's a mistake on my part.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, but his carbon monoxide levels were so high that he shouldn't really have even been able to stand up, and he wouldn't have had enough control of his senses.
Right. So
we
have to think then. I mean, because you saw Henry Paul leaving in the CCTV from the hotel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. No, I've got some. I have some slides.
He was walking fine. Yeah, he went through revolving doors without going round them twice. You know, so he got out there and he got in the car and he drove away, and we can assume that all happened. So, for his carbon monoxide to be that high, then one has to question the results of the medical examiner.
Yeah. I mean, that picture that you see top right, that's one of the last pictures that was taken of them when the car stopped. And the guy who took the picture is a paparazzi called Roald Rat, which I've always just thought was like Roland Rat. It's just, it's like Roland Rat, the paparazzi.
Any relation to Rishi Sunak?
But there are, I mean, I don't generally like linking videos into the slides because it causes technical issues. But if people go online to YouTube, you'll find videos of the CCTV footage of Diana and Dodie and Henri Paul and Trevor Rees-Jones walking to the car, and that does not look like a drunk person.
And they're all in that lift. They're all in the lift together.
You'd think that if he was 4 times over the alcohol limit,
you'd be like, "Oh, he's not driving me."
Exactly. There's also a lot of questions about Henri Paul. There's a missing 3 hours between 7 p.m. and 10 p.m. On the night of the accident, where his whereabouts have not been adequately explained. He had multiple bank accounts, and when I say multiple, like 7 or 8,
don't we all, with
different amounts of money. I mean, he was earning like £25,000-30,000 a year at that point. And there's stories that he was connected to MI6. I mean, there's been loads of this stuff in the papers over the years. And Patsy, you said it correctly yourself. And where are we with the slides? That's Trevor Rees-Jones. He was Diana's bodyguard.
Is that
he was
that's
also the
after
only person,
the accident? That's them recovered, isn't it?
Yeah. And the only reason he survived is because he had a seatbelt on. Now, when this picture was taken, none of them had seatbelts on.
No.
But
hey,
when they crashed, he didn't have one on when he got in the car. And the normal procedure for security is that they don't have the seatbelt on because they need to be able to move around in case something happens.
When did they die? What was their date of death? 90? Was it 90 something?
Oh, hang on. It was 17. It was 1990. Hang on a minute.
97? No.
Yeah, it was something. I think it was 97. Let me just. Sorry, I'm useless.
It's all right.
It's live, people. We're all on the fly. This is happening as we go out. August 31st, 1997.
Yeah, right, okay. My memory's still working. I'm not Joe Biden yet.
Absolutely, right. So they started off at the Ritz, which is in the quite a significant location in Paris. The what is it called? The Place de Vendôme, I think. Mm-hmm. Surrounded by all sorts of weird imagery and stuff like that. Diana, also the name of the moon goddess.
Yeah.
And the Pont d'Armor is Passage of the Moon Goddess.
Okay.
Which is what the name means. And it's also an ancient, the site that she died is equally interesting.
Been there.
Because it was the sacred site in an ancient temple of the goddess Diana. Mm-hmm. And it was also used for human sacrifice and ritual murder. It had been a pagan sacrificial site in the time of the Merovingian kings, and was an underground chamber. Was it? So my question is, was that deliberate? Because when you look at the route, that's the accident. There's the route.
Right. So show me the route.
So here's the route. Now, they had to get from the Ritz to Dodi Al-Fayad's apartment.
Okay.
And earlier in the day, when they'd gone from his apartment to the Ritz, they'd gone down the Champs-Elysees.
Yeah,
nice, direct, straight line route.
But what time is it now? What time is it when they leave the Ritz?
20 minutes past 12 at night, so 20 past midnight.
Okay.
So the roads would have been quiet. Now, for some inexplicable reason...
Have you ever driven? Have you ever been in Paris?
I've been to Paris, but I've never driven that particular route.
Yeah, but the roads are never quiet in Paris.
That's true.
It's a bit like London.
I actually did. Yeah. In a minute, because there's also questions about why it took so long for her to get to the hospital after the accident.
Okay.
But the route that they took to start with makes no sense.
Yeah, because
from any kind of reasonable driving perspective, if you're trying to outrun paparazzi and you need to get from A to B really quickly, why would you take this massively circuitous route? It just doesn't make any sense at all, because they went down through the Place d'Armor tunnel, and to then get to Dodi Fayad's apartment, they would have had to go all the way. I mean, it was like the scenic route.
I can see that. Having said that, right, if you're trying to throw people off, you might go the wrong way to let people think that you weren't going to his apartment. And then you might find that the road that they were on, the one that goes underneath, through the tunnels and all that, is a faster road than the Champs-Elysees, because that's speed limited, whereas that one looked like possible. It was more of a dual carriageway.
I mean, these are all interesting questions.
Yeah, I mean, there might be a reason why they were going that route. Maybe she wanted a kebab or something.
It's possible. It's possible. But when they basically got to the tunnel, there's witness reports of a very, very bright flashing light of some sort of strobe, and the car somehow hits the 13th pillar, which obviously is a significant number. And it was also, Diana had an issue with 13. The fact she had a sale of old clothes at Christie's or Sotheby's the same year that she died, and she'd refused to allow a 13th lot in the auction. And so, she didn't like the number 13.
Yeah, well, the Chinese do that all the time. They never have a 13th floor. I mean, I lived in
but there was a lot of pillars. Why did the car just happen to hit the 13th one? I mean, it seems a bit...
That's just coincidence. Come on, Ed. I mean, let's be sensible here. I mean, if you're... the car's traveling at speed, right? And it's obviously out of control, or even if it's not out of control, even if the guy's deliberately going for pillar 13, I challenge you to be able to hit that,
Yeah, I agree. The car itself's interesting, because did you know that the Mercedes that they were in, I think it was an E-Class, So it was a lot lighter than the Mercedes, the sort of big.
Oh, the S-Class.
Yeah.
E-Class is still a big car, though.
Yeah, no, it's still. I mean, it's still a big, fast car, but it had been stolen a few weeks before.
That car had been.
The car.
That actual car.
That actual car had been stolen from Etoile Limousines, who were they were basically the Ritz limousine company, also owned by Mohammed Al Fayed.
Right. Okay. Well, that then explains why Henry could drive it, because basically it's his boss's car.
Oh no, absolutely. But he wasn't. The limousine company found it strange.
Yeah.
That he wasn't. That it wasn't one of their drivers chosen, because that wasn't how it normally. All I'm saying with that is that I mean, Mohammed Al Fayed could have had Donald Duck drive the car if he wanted to.
Yeah. Okay.
But it was a break in normal procedures, which I find telling. But it had basically been stolen, and so when it was recovered from the theft, it had to undergo extensive repairs, and it had supposedly been standing outside a restaurant. The driver's door was flung open, and the chauffeur pulled out by 3 Arabic-speaking men with handguns. The vehicle was missing for 2 weeks, and when it was found, the wheels were missing, the door ripped off, and the electronic system and equipment controlling the braking system had gone. The car basically would have been written off by an insurance company. But that kind of suggests a cover for some sort of equipment being installed or something else happening to that
possibility, car. I suppose.
It's. I mean, this is rabbit hole territory. So
but
you're speculating.
But then you're having to put. I mean, how many cars has this limousine company got? Right? How do you make sure that car gets delivered to the Ritz on the night that Diana and Dodie want to go from point A to point B? How do you know? There's an awful lot.
If you're in control of all of the companies, absolutely. But
so you're saying
these things are planned out.
Are you saying Al Fayed's in on it?
Well, that's speculation.
That would be speculation, yeah.
I mean, he was the one that was in control of all of the security. He was the one that had arranged for Dodie and Diana to meet in the first place. He was the one that had effectively ordered Dodie out of one relationship into another.
Yeah.
And he was absolutely paranoid about his own security. This is why the change in security procedures was my number one question in the list, because Mohammed Al Fayed, when he goes around Harrods, I don't know if he still owns it, but when he obviously used to own Harrods, and he would have 2 layers of security. He'd have his immediate guards, and then there would be people that were dressed just like normal punters that were tooled up to the max, that were just kind of there in case something happened. So he was completely paranoid. He used to, everything was bugged. So Diana would have been listened to the entire time that she was in the presence of Dodie, most likely.
Yeah.
And then we go back to why did they refuse to allow Mercedes to examine the car? I always found that one very dodgy.
Yes, that is a bit strange.
And I've sort of started going on the subject of the Merovingians, and because Diana's Stuart bloodline, through her, theoretically, she could trace her lineage back to the Merovingians, and they have a whole very interesting series of just rituals, and there's all connections back to Jesus and all kinds of stuff. But you can't deny that the location of the crash is significant. Next thing that's interesting, so the crash has happened. There's been a flash of light. There's talk of there was a white Fiat Uno that had theoretically been involved in the collision in some way that then drove off at high speed. There's a few witness reports. There are some very early news reports that essentially got deep sixed and they were never seen again. And sorry, I've just lost my place in my notes. Right, yeah, going back to the car, the head of security for Fayed had said they wouldn't have had time to check the car out, and it should have been checked out. There could have been a bomb in it. It was just a ridiculous plan. And there's all sorts of reasons why you wouldn't do that at all. Where's this? There we go. This is the slide. Fletcher Prouty. This is someone that we talked about a bit during the JFK episode. And it's a key rule for me when investigating rabbit holes, assassinations particularly. It's not about who could do it or why they did it or what happened or anything like that, but who has the power to cover it up, call off the normal security, and to ensure that the people who are responsible get away. Right, next slide. So Diana's basically, she'd pissed the royal family off with the Bashir interview. We've got Trevor Rees-Jones. Hang on, sorry, I'm just cycling through these slides. Pont Dalmar. Oh, there we go. Right. So the next big issues are about what happened after the crash. So the crash has happened. Whatever caused it, we're just sort of speculating.
Yep.
And witnesses report that they saw a woman getting up and into an ambulance. Diana was basically, there was a doctor who happened, he was a French emergency doctor who was driving through the tunnel in the opposite direction. At the time that the accident happened, Dr. Frederick Mallet, and he had an American friend by the name of Mark Butt with him as well, which is an interesting name. And they just happened to be there.
It's the name for the Simpsons, doesn't it?
It really is. And yeah, they were there in the aftermath of the crash, and he reports it at about 12:25 a.m. And by 12:26, Dr. Mayer said he'd seen the crashed Mercedes, stopped his car, turned on the warning lights, run across the Mercedes to establish there were 2 people dead and 2 alive. He phoned for the emergency services, but he's one of 160 Parisian doctors, or who at the time, who are on constant call for emergencies. So they're basically just roving doctors. And he treated accident victims loads because he'd also been part of the French emergency ambulance service. But a doctor on constant call for emergencies said all he had in his car to help Diana was an oxygen cylinder and mask. But he was in control of Diana for 15 to 20 minutes before the emergency, the ambulance turned up.
So we've only had word to say that it was oxygen.
And he's also contradicted himself as well. He claimed initially that Diana didn't say anything to him, but then he told the Times newspaper that apparently repeatedly she said that she hurt as he put a resuscitation mask over her mouth. And Trevor Rees-Jones, the bodyguard, also said that he has flashbacks of hearing a female voice calling out the back of the car. First it's a groan, then Dodie's name was called, and that can only be Princess Diana's voice. And that was, he told that to the Daily Mirror.
Yeah.
Now,
there were pictures circulating around at the time, right?
Yes. I did. Let me just go through the slides. Like I said, I had some issues. That was the car. Yeah, there's bottom left.
Yeah.
That supposedly is the last picture taken of Diana when she was alive.
Yeah. Yeah. So there were pictures circulating around at the time that purported to show her in the car and she was still alive.
Yeah. And there was some where is that? A little bit all over the place, I'm afraid. There was basically some eyewitness reports from people who'd happened to be at the mouth of the tunnel. They're the same people who reported the massively bright flash of light, which theoretically could have blinded the driver of the car and caused him to lose control of said vehicle. And they basically say that she was alive.
Yeah.
And also there was a medic who said that the princess was conscious and had her eyes open as he pulled her from the Mercedes, and said she suffered cardiac arrest as she was placed on the stretcher. There is reports saying that she was trapped, which is why it took so long.
Well, having said that, looking at the vehicle, right, it's all front end impact. The back of the car and the rear passenger compartment looks fine.
Yeah, and if you look at
well, one of the big tells us the door is open, right? The door's not been cut open. The door is open, right? Now, to open the door, the frame's got to be in the right shape.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, if you look at the front, there's some pictures of the front of the car.
Yeah, where it's at the pillar.
Where you can actually see it. I mean, it's because they're designed so that the engine kind of. Yeah. I mean, they're designed to have an impact like that. So
crumple zones. Yeah.
Absolutely. But there was a massive delay in taking Diana to hospital. And supposedly the official explanation is that she was trapped in the wreckage. But that's complete nonsense, because one of the ambulance crew told French newspaper La Parisienne that when he arrived, Diana was lying with most of her body out of the car with her legs resting on the rear seat. She was agitated, semi-knocked out, but conscious. She was groaning and struggling feebly. She murmured, "Oh my God," several times. Diana was moved from the car shortly after the fire service arrived, and the excuse of her being trapped just doesn't stand up to any close scrutiny at all.
No.
Another excuse for the delay is that the emergency doctors had to give her a blood transfusion, which is also complete nonsense, because the French emergency services teams tend not to carry blood transfusion equipment around, because they'd have to figure out what the blood type was. You can't just...
You could give plasma, but you couldn't give any. You couldn't give, or you could give saline or something, but you can't give someone a blood transfusion in the field unless you know what blood group they are. Yeah,
absolutely. And then when the ambulance eventually did leave the tunnel, the driver was ordered to go no faster than 25 miles an hour. And some reports say it took as long as 40 minutes to cover the 3.7 miles to La Petite-Salpêtrière. Oh, I'm sorry, French people. I can't say that.
40 minutes?
Yeah. And
they
if you look
cover 3 miles. Even at 25 miles an hour, you're going to be there in 10 minutes, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I did this Google... it was just like a Google directions thing.
Yeah.
And this was done at about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So not at midnight or whatever. And that was 28 minutes, and that's rush hour.
Yeah.
That's Google Red, basically. So what happened there? And also, if you look on this map, I've added other hospitals that were closer, so you can see there's at least 3, 4 hospitals that they could have gotten to quicker.
Yeah.
And so she arrived at the hospital at 10 minutes past 2 in the morning, which is an hour and 45 minutes after the crash.
Right.
Which is just absurd.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just by any medical standards whatsoever, even in the 90s, that's nuts.
Yeah. I mean, we knew about the golden hour then as well. Yeah,
absolutely. So waiting at the hospital, there was a surgical team headed by Professor Bruno Rieu, who is the duty surgeon, who we're told first heard about the crash whilst he was on his rounds, which is kind of strange because he was a renowned senior surgeon doing his rounds at 2 o'clock in the morning. And waiting with him when Diana arrived was Professor Pierre Coriat, who was the head of anesthetics. Professor Alain Pavie, who was a chest and heart specialist, and Professor Pierre Benezet, who is another experienced surgeon. And they'd been in telephone communication with the emergency team in the tunnel throughout. And we are told opened Diana's chest cavity, repaired the artery, battled to save her for an hour and a half before admitting defeat. Which is remarkable because the autopsy report shows that Diana was clinically dead at 12:45 a.m. while still lying in the tunnel. So she was clinically dead for an hour and 25 minutes before she even arrived at the hospital, and for 3 hours before the professors walked out of the operating theatre to announce that she'd died. Now, having the body examined at a location under the control of the perpetrators is absolutely vital if you're going to assassinate someone and get away with it.
Yeah.
And if you remember back from our JFK episode, similar stuff. Now, Paris, just as a little aside, is once you start examining assassinations, it becomes very clear that Paris is a kind of favorite place for rich people or important people to get assassinated, particularly the ones where it's an internal thing. For example, Amschel Rothschild, who was from the English branch of the Rothschild family, was murdered in Paris in 1996 in what many claim to have been another inter-elite war. Yeah. Obviously, there have been loads of those. Now, Richard Tomlinson.
Hold on. Obviously.
Well,
I've never heard of an inter-elite war. What? Is this another rabbit hole that we need to open up for another date?
Well, there's plenty of arguments that yes, absolutely, there are these elite wars, because we like to think of this. We have this. Hollywood has trained. I know, but Hollywood has trained us to have. Well, that's the whole point of the rabbit holes, dude. But Hollywood has trained us to think in terms of good guys and bad guys. Life is not that simple. We don't have. It's not like, oh, Bill Gates is a bad guy, or oh, Klaus Schwab is a bad guy. Yeah. I mean, I know I love lampooning these guys on Twitter, and they're kind of the figureheads, but the really important ones you never see and you never hear about. And they're factions. They don't. I'm sure they don't all share the same goals.
And
now
forgot. We forgot. We should have set a poll for the next one, shouldn't we?
Well, we can do that as we get towards the end.
Okay. Right.
I mean, we've hit the hour, and we're pretty much there. I mean, there's some interesting stuff. I do want to mention Richard Tomlinson, who's a former agent of Britain's MI6, and he gave evidence to the French inquiry into Diana's death. And in 1997, he served a 6-month jail sentence under the Official Secrets Act for trying to sell his memoirs. And in 1998, he was arrested again at gunpoint in Paris at the request of the British government, who are concerned at his association in that city with MI5 whistleblower David Shayler, who's now been painted as a crazy person, but he really isn't. And he was arrested and jailed in Paris.
Hold on, David Shayler. What? The name's familiar. What's his claim to
MI5
fame?
Whistleblower.
Right. Okay.
You'd have to Google it. I can't remember the details off the top of my head, but it was big news in the 90s.
Yeah, got you.
And Tomlinson apparently told Hervé Stefan, who was the judge in charge of the inquiry, that Diana was murdered. And according to a report on BBC's, this is back on CFAX in August of 1998. He told the judge that Henri Paul was an asset of the British intelligence and was one of the bodyguards who remained, as was one of the bodyguards who remained unnamed. But obviously, the judge concluded it was an accident. And the judge of I don't think it was a judge, but there was an inquiry, was it called the Stevens inquiry or something, into Diana's death? And he said it was all just an accident and drunk driver and nothing to see here.
So this inquiry, that Stevens inquiry was conducted in the UK?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. I think it was John Stevens. Or Stephen, possibly. Sorry. My notes are a little bit all over the place. But one thing that I didn't mention is that Diana had actually written a note to a friend saying that my husband is planning an accident in my car, brake failure, and so he can marry Camilla. Interestingly, Camilla was involved in an accident as well.
What?
There was. Let me just pop this up. This is one of the Yeah, it was a few at the time. Hang on a sec. These are notes that I made. Yeah, basically, it was a very similar accident a few years, early 2000s or something. And it was supposedly, rumor has it, that a branch of MI5 decided that taking out Camilla would solve a constitutional crisis that they found themselves in after the royal divorce. Now, that was in a book called Diana the Hidden Evidence by John King and John Beveridge.
Right. Hold on a second. This note that Diana's written here, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, she did write this note. This is her note, yeah?
Yeah.
Right. So it says, my husband is planning an accident in my car, brake failure, and serious head injury in order to make me something, to make the path clear for him to marry somebody. Not Camilla. It says Camilla is nothing but a decoy. Who's that? Tig B or something? Is that one of his polo pigs? Is that one of his polo chums?
No idea. I mean, there's all sorts of stuff. I wanted to find the most complete piece of this note that I could in the pictures. So I haven't gone into any detail about Camilla being a decoy, but she's going to be queen, so I don't think she's necessarily a decoy.
Ben's now questioning the note.
Well, the Daily Mirror is questionable, so I mean, look, these are things that I found that I find interesting, and everyone.
We don't need confirmation, Ben. We're talking about something that's been published in the mainstream media. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
This is all.
They need to confirm it or not. So they've already published this, so we can comment on it to our heart's content. They've published it. They've verified that as Diana's note. So we don't need to go and look into it.
One other thing to mention is that the Pont del Martano is also it's on the Rose Line, so it falls on the ancient meridian of Paris, and that is sometimes associated with geomantic theories involving energy lines, ley lines. It's also connected to several monuments in Paris, and if anyone's seen or read the Da Vinci Code, that covers an awful lot, because that holy bloodline is kind of what we're talking about here, and Diana was basically connected to that. And so it's kind of nearing the end. That was just this amazing picture. That was literally just the cards and flowers that people were leaving for her.
Yeah.
And for those of us who lived through it, I didn't necessarily go up to London, but it was the outpouring of grief was just phenomenal, because Diana was always the most popular royal, and I think she carried the royal family along ever since the wedding.
Yeah,
her energy and her light was basically they kind of fed off it in a way. Mm-hmm. And the reaction of the royal family when it happened was, I mean, the Queen basically had to be shamed into saying anything at all, because they just went off to Sandringham and didn't say anything.
Yeah, the Queen.
And they were saying it's out of respect and all this kind of thing. No. But they really had to be pushed, as you can see from the two headlines from the mainstream media. And yeah, I mean, there's affairs. These are couple of slides about Hewitt and Mannicky. I'm not sure if that's the guy you saw in the teacup, but I don't think it was mainstream reports.
Yeah.
And we're pretty much at the end. I mean, that's the rest of it is kind of history, as they say. I mean, there's talk of there's the white Fiat Uno, was supposedly owned by a journalist called James Adnanson, and he was supposedly committed suicide. He'd been following Diana closely in the week before her death, And he was found to have committed suicide when his burnt corpse was found in the wreckage of a car in the French countryside. And the fireman who discovered him, a guy called Christophe Pellat, has said, I saw him at close range and I'm absolutely convinced he'd been shot in the head twice. And I mean, Mohammed Al-Fayed he spent years and years and years and a lot of money trying to investigate this. And my personal theory is that he, and this is speculation, I don't want anyone to sue me, I'm just talking out of my rear end as usual. But I think he wanted in on the elite, and I don't think he necessarily realized that his son was going to be part of the deal. And when he did, the gift of hindsight meant that he kind of lost it a bit, and he was trying to get to the bottom of it for years and years and years.
I'll be honest, I think Diana sealed her own fate when she started going out with Dodi.
I agree. I think on some level her fate was sealed for her before she got married.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily think that anyone thought of bumping her off.
Yeah, I mean, she was going to produce the heir to the throne and then the spare. And then if she kept her head down and if she hadn't turned into the icon that she became, right? She would have probably have lived her life as Charles's wife, and he would just have kept, popping off Camilla. And nothing would ever have come off it,
That wasn't her. I mean, that totally wasn't her.
No, it wasn't.
And I mean, she wanted the fairy tale. Even one of the ladies who was interviewed, it was one of her spiritual guys.
Yeah.
Said that she just wanted to do what normal people did, and she fell in love too easily, and it was too easy to manipulate her first of all into falling in love with Charles.
Yeah.
And then falling in love with Dodi.
Yeah.
But you just get the sense it's this picture. I mean, she just comes across as just a genuine, warm-hearted person that just wants to be loved and have a family and all of those good things.
Yeah, I think she's very much the victim in this. I think. I mean, people love the Queen and all that, but I think the Queen had something of her mother in her as well.
I think so too. I think that the Queen was also of a completely different generation. I mean, by the time Diana came along, the Queen had been on the throne for decades.
Yeah. And
her whole outlook on life, her upbringing, her training, how she was taught to be Queen, because the Queen had her own issues, because she was never supposed to be Queen, because her dad was only became king because of the abdication.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
And I mean, it's a fascinating story, and I mean, we could go on and on for hours. And I tried to.
So on Saturday, 74 years later, not since Diana died, but 74 years after he was born, Charles is actually going to ascend to the throne. It's been a long time coming.
Yeah, I'm sure he's thinking that too. I mean, it's an interesting one, because I'm not sure that the royal family's ever really recovered from Diana's death. And I mean, if you see the difference in reaction between the Jubilee and the coronation, and admittedly, the economic state in the country is a lot worse, and people have got a lot less money and that kind of thing. But the enthusiasm that people have that doesn't require spending any money, that people had for the Queen's Jubilee, it just doesn't feel like it's there. The country genuinely doesn't feel like it's preparing for this massive celebration.
No. Did you see do you see the amount of impromptu events that have been cancelled because nobody's going to them? Nobody's signing up.
Yeah, absolutely. I've seen quite a few of those on Twitter.
Yeah.
And it's I don't know. I'm kind of ambivalent. I mean, I have two, because I'm half Dutch and half English, so I have two kings. I've got King Charles, and Koning Willem-Alexander, and yeah, one of them's orange and one of them's red, white, and blue, and it's I don't. Yeah. They were both, to be honest, they were both forcing me to, or not forcing me, but they were encouraging me to get the thing that they were all supposed to be getting, and that for me is kind of a line.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was the Diana rabbit hole. As I said, there's so much more that we could have covered, and I'm just sort of a bit conscious of time. But yeah, I mean, if anyone's got more questions or they want further sources of research, then feel free to shout me out on Twitter, and I'm more than happy to.
Shalini asked the question.
Let's take some questions.
So Shalini asked if you could recommend any books for her on the subject, because she's not on Twitter, so obviously if you send them to me, I'll make sure that they get to Shalini somehow.
Yeah, sure, Shalini, thanks for the question. Yes, there are definitely some books that I can find for you. I mean, if you're not on Twitter, I have a Telegram channel as well. You can find me on Telegram as Ed the Techie too, so you can always shout me out on there.
I think Shalini does Telegram.
Yeah, there was one that I mentioned. Where are we? Hang on. There is one that I can. Yeah, Diana, the Hidden Evidence, John King and John Beveridge. And let me just pop that one up.
Yeah, so Shalini at the moment says, I think the monarchy's finished, and I think you're right, Shalini. I think, but it's going to be a long, slow death, much like the fall of Western civilization, that I firmly believe we are actually living through at this moment in time.
That's the book on the screen.
Cool.
And I mean, I have to agree. I think that it's the royal family just doesn't have the same lure. I mean, people are really critical of it. I mean, everyone's struggling, and yet the taxpayers are having to fork out for a massive coronation and golden coaches, and it's just lost something. And I think it was that magic. I mean, part of the magic died when Diana died.
Yeah.
And then a whole lot more died when Charles died. Not Charles. Sorry. No, when Queen Elizabeth
that's a
died.
Prophecy. This is a prophecy.
No, it's not. Oh, crikey. Let's not go there.
If he doesn't make it to the coronation on Saturday, you're in the frame, Ed. MI6 will be... Oh, sorry, not 6. 5 will be around.
They'll probably both be after me if that happened. Crikey. No, nothing to do with me. Nothing at all. So, are there any other questions? Do people have... Does the audience have any questions?
Any questions from the troll room? If not, I think we'll start wrapping it up. But yeah, we'll don't worry, Shalini, we'll get the book. We'll get the book to you, or through Vaughn or something, but no worries to that. Shalini says she's going to try and find you on Telegram.
Yeah, no, that's cool.
So I'd like to thank. I mean, 32 people watching right now. That's something of a good result there, Ed.
That's awesome. I hope everyone's enjoyed it.
Yeah, I think so. It's getting better and better. So, the question is, what are we going to talk about next?
Well, why not because I know Shalini's one of your regular viewers.
Uh-huh.
So why not let Shalini pick something?
Yeah, okay.
Or suggest something.
Yeah.
Or we have some audience suggestions.
Any suggestions from the audience? You've got...
I mean, I'd like to cover the 7/7 bombings. That would be
really? The 7/7 bombings?
That would be my addition to the list, because the 7/7 bombings are... They're a kind of British 9/11.
Yeah, they kind of are, I suppose. 7/7. What was the two things that were 50-50 on this one? It was either
Freemasonry or Diana.
Or Diana, yeah.
I mean, we could do Freemasonry. We could do the poll on Freemasonry or 7/7.
Yeah.
And it would be kind of...
One of the ones I'd like to look into a bit is Admiral Byrd and his expedition to the Antarctic.
Well, you haven't chosen rabbit hole, John, so why don't we do Admiral Byrd?
Yeah, well, yeah, because you know how he took off with basically a navy in tow to investigate the Antarctica, and he came back early.
Yeah, and there's some very interesting stories that have cropped up since then.
Admiral
Let's
Byrd,
do that.
said. Right.
Admiral Byrd, excellent.
Admiral Byrd.
Yeah, let's do that one.
Okay. Right. Okay. I'd like to thank everyone for attending this, and in particular Ed for his illuminating discussion on Diana. And it's been a bit of a sad story because I don't think anyone had a really bad word to say about Diana, to be fair.
No.
Even if you didn't
not
like
anyone that was genuine.
Yeah, even if you didn't like the Royals, you know, there was nothing. She was kind of in that in-between zone, wasn't she, you know?
Well, she transcended both.
Yeah,
that was
what.
I think she kind of that's a nice way of putting her, because she managed to transcend all different levels, because she could talk to little kids, she could talk to AIDS patients, she could walk around a minefield and like talk to like African babies, and all of the pictures that you see of her in situations like that, you see this genuine, caring person.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, she's one of those people that still, all this time later, still has a mystique about her.
Yeah, I think she does. And I'd like to thank you, Ed, for this one. It's been great. And I've thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yes, it's been really good. I love doing these podcasts, and I look forward to the next one.
So, everyone out there, next time we'll look into Admiral Byrd and Antarctica. So, with that, it's good night from me, it's good night from Ed, and we'll see you in round about a month's time.
Yep.
Take care.
Inshallah.
It's been great for you.
See you later, guys.
Make all the demons quiet, yeah. We were built to thrive, yeah. I think that we've all had enough. What keeps you up at night, yeah. Make all the demons quiet, yeah. We